Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the LiftAffect podcast. I am your host, Matt McNeil, founder, clinical director, and director of human performance at LiftAffect, where we assist professional pilots with maintaining better mental health and optimizing their mental skills. The goal of this podcast is simple: to help pilots and other high liability professionals and disciplines come out of the shadows to discover how we can live better lives personally and professionally. Join us each episode as we discuss various topics ranging from mental health, mental skills and performance, to business, entrepreneurship, and a few other surprises along the way.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the LiftAffect podcast. I'm your host, Karl Keller, and the man who has a test of wills with his dog. He's sitting there telling him, I will win, and the dog giving him a puppy face, so the man will lose. Matt McNeil. So, buddy, have you lost yet?
It's funny. I'm watching I have a camera here. This is her upstairs. So I got a dog with the cone of shame on right now, and she's a puppy, and she's discovered chewing things. So I don't know. The treat is still on the dog bed down there. So neither of us have won.
Yeah. Let me paint the picture here. Matt is in his room ready to sit there and do our podcast, and his dog is in the doorway, sitting down, and it's a test of wills. Who's going to win? The dog won't come in, and every time Matt goes to reach him, he pulls back. So it's like the dog's going, you're coming to me. And
yeah, she's a German Shepherd, man. So she is tough. She is tough. Yeah, she's just like, she's protesting right now. She's like, I will not eat that treat because I'm not coming in there. And I'm like, then you're not getting the treat. You're making me wear the cone of shame.
You're coming to me.
Exactly. Yeah, she's pretty tough, but we'll see how this goes. I'll let you know how it goes. I'll make sure to point the camera. Yeah, we'll see what goes on.
How's your week been going, buddy?
The week has been fast and furious.
Well, that's a good thing. At least you haven't had time to think about something.
Well, not furious, I should say. But we started a new V1 cohort. Charlie cohort started yesterday, which was awesome. Really excited. Cool bunch of people. Cool. Really good group cohesion. First meeting, they were just starting to gel, man. So it was it's pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. Yeah. Just fun people in there. So that's what's going on. What's going on for you? What's happening?
My son's going through a big issue with he wants to become a pilot, and he's looking at these academies, and they did not put anything up on their website other than, hey, classes are starting every Monday. So he goes to start doing the process, and they go, oh yeah, the next one is going to be sometime next year. And so he's all devastated right now, trying to figure out what to do. He was a volunteer. He was a fireman. He's only 21, so he's still young, but he wants to follow in my footsteps. So right now we're just trying to deal with the going, what are we going to do? I said, dude, you're only 21. You'll be 22 next year. It's the world is still your oyster.
You got time.
Yeah. But to him, no. It's like, and he puts unrealistic expectations. Really. He just, whenever I said, be pragmatic. And if it doesn't work, be prepared. You've got time. Yeah. And if it does, that's just bonus. But he always thinks that it's going to happen, which is good to be optimistic and hopeful. But when it doesn't come through, then it's like, it's a harder pill to swallow.
Yep.
I told you, when people sometimes wonder if this is truly a scripted podcast. You're gonna.
It's clearly not. It's clearly not. I mean, I think boy, your expectations must be really low.
You're about to find out how unscripted it really is.
Oh God.
We sometimes have a sense of what we're going to talk about, but right now. Matt goes, "What are we going to talk about today?" I said, "You're about to find out." So
brace.
Yeah, yeah. So if you never hear this, it didn't go well.
Yeah, exactly. If a tree falls in the forest and nobody's there to hear it, did it make a sound? I don't know.
This is something that I've wanted to talk about or thought about for a while because it's personal. It's not personal like private, but it's something that has affected me in my life, and you know very well once I bring it up what it is. During my career, I have seen and talked to quite a few pilots that have done similar things along this line, and that is flying is their primary source of income and what they do every day, but they often want to have that entrepreneurial bent, and they want to do things on the side, either because they're concerned about what's going on with the economy, they want to earn some extra income, or they just want to have something to do once they retire or just in their off time, depending on how senior they are. So this is kind of a two-parter. The first part is the desire to have a part-time hobby or second career is great, but it can create a huge financial impact on their lives.
Yep.
You know, and when it doesn't, it creates almost in a way self-induced stress because of the time it takes, because of the money pit it may or may not turn into, because some are very successful, but an awful lot, when I've talked to so many guys, they're on their third or fourth business venture, and then they're trying to recoup money from the first two or three that they lost on. So I guess two things that I want to ask is, the first is when you start something out like that, what are things to do when it doesn't work? Because that it's a self-created stress. Do you just, part of it is just to accept it and walk away and say, you know what, that just didn't work? Or how do you turn it around so that it doesn't affect the rest of your personal life with your family, or it God willing, it never bleeds over into the cockpit because you've created an unwanted or something that didn't exist. It was self-created where you lost so much money doing it because you sunk it in there, and now you're affecting things because you got to fly more to make up for it and things like that. The second part of the question is, of those that are doing this, what are things to deal with to help them not get in that position? I.e., what I mean by that is some tips and ideas, fundamentals of becoming and remaining profitable with a side hustle in general. So that's kind of the question, is because it's something that so many of us deal with. If you have, I would challenge anybody to tell me they've never flown with someone that talks about, hey, I've got this really cool thing that you might be interested in. How many times have you heard that in a cockpit?
Oh God, many.
So I want to throw that kind of at you and see where you go with that one.
Okay. I mean, I think it's probably going to touch on stuff that we've touched on in the past. A
little bit.
But let's, like repetition's the mother of mastery. So it's always good to review this. So one is, so the first question was, what do you do when it doesn't work? How do you deal out. With it? Yeah. Get out. Get out. Get out. That's where people, they keep holding on. So the question is really, you need to figure out, when do you get out? How do you know when it's time to get out? Few things that come to my mind is, when do you quit? Well, I've talked about it before, this is kind of a Seth Godin model. Anytime you're building anything, there's going to be plateaus and there's going to be backslides. That's just a normal part of development. If you think about your flight training, or I know all of you are aces and you never had any problems, but but it's like we call them learning plateaus for a reason. You're gonna reach a point and then it's going to stop, and you're going to struggle, and then you're going to reach a point and it's going to stop and it's going to struggle. That's to climb to the top. And there is this thing sometimes where we backslide, and let's just call that the dip. There's a dip. There's always going to be a dip on the way to the top. It's like looking at the stock market over the last 100 years. It's up and down and up and down. There are dips in the market, but it always continues to climb. It continues to climb. The dip is inevitable. And when so you need to understand when you're in a dip, and you have to be able to work through it. So there's a few things that come to mind, which we can get into in a second. But if you find that when you are in the dip, whatever you're doing, and it doesn't, we got to talk about realistic time frames. I think some people are like, I need it now. It's got to happen now. And it's like, that doesn't, you've got to give some things, there are cycles, and you have to wait for things to come around, to determine. But if you wait a long enough time and you find that you just keep ending back in the same place, no matter what you do, and you've waited it out, you work through the cycles, but you can't seem to get past this dip part, you quit. It's called a cul-de-sac. It just, no matter what you do, it just comes back to the same place. When you find yourself in a cul-de-sac, you get out. Now, worse than a cul-de-sac is a cliff, where if you continue on, it is diminishing returns. That is and that often comes down to financial stuff, where you're like, okay, I'm fully leveraged. It's like now it needs more. And now I've got to borrow more. It's almost like the poker
thing where I'm doubling down.
Doubling down. Right.
Because I got to make it back up type thing.
Yeah.
And that's where I see a lot of people go.
Yeah. You quit. So you need to, the key is to be able to, as pattern recognition, you have to be able to understand, like, when you're, where are you on the map? Where am I on the map? Am I in a dip? Is this a cul-de-sac? Is this a cliff? If it's a cul-de-sac or a cliff, you quit immediately, as fast as possible. And the best business people are the people that understand where they are. They can recognize the signs and symptoms very quickly, and then they take action really fast. Where it goes wrong for entrepreneurs, especially ones that don't have a lot of business experience, is they don't know where they are. They think that they can just, I can save it. It's sort of like a missed approach. It's like, you don't, I can save it. I can say there's a point where you go missed. And I don't think you push it. That's a silly thing to do. Sometimes you do, there's certain situations where if you don't continue, it might be worse, right? I mean, that happens. I can recall, going into Jackson Hole, like, it's always, if you know the weather in there, if you're right on glide slope, you're going to go miss because you're not going to see the runway. So sometimes you got to ride a little low, just a smidge, a titch low on the glide slope, and you're going to get in. I remember I used to fly with this guy. He taught this to me, especially at night in the spring, March, April. If you're right on glide slope, you're going to go miss most of the time at night. But if you ride just a little low, not full deep, not even half scale deep, but a little low, you're going to see the lights, you're going to get in. Okay. So you got to have some discretion through tons of experience. But for the most part, like, you don't go below minimums. And if you're not configured by the altitude that you go missed, that's what you do. So you need to have some rules. And I cannot certainly teach you that in 5 minutes on a podcast. But like, you need to study, you need to read, you need to get coaching, you need to learn some fundamentals of business, or you're just going to be lost.
And I think that's a big key right there. And this is the trap I fell into that I think many others do, is it becomes personal. Yes. It's not a business. They always say, like with stock trading or stocks, don't get personally attached. I remember with United when they they had bankruptcy, so many of my friends kept holding on to things going, it's going to bounce back. It's going to bounce back. I've put all this into it. And I go, right. If you can't do that because it's just hope. Hope is not a strategy. And the other part was the fact is that you become blind because you take it as a failure. If it doesn't work out, I can't let it go because I failed. And that again now hits your psyche.
Yes.
So how do you get past that where you've equated your failure or success as a human being to a business entity?
You understand
or to a venture.
Yeah. Well, perfectionism is not helpful.
No.
And that is, you and pilots are the worst. This is where I see them trying to be entrepreneurs. They just suck at it because they have this perfectionistic, well, no, I mean, that's not true. But, you've done some good stuff. I mean, you've some pretty profitable businesses at times. But look, things shift and change, and you got to be able to recognize the change. And, you have to choose your partners very carefully, who you partner with, right? I've made that mistake. But pilots have this perfectionistic attitude of and that's part of our culture is you can't fail check rides. You have to get everything right 95% of the time. I mean, there was a guy in Charlie group yesterday, a new member, and he said, what's hard about the profession is we got to be right 95% of the time, and the other 5% have to be acts of God. So it leaves no room for error. And that's fine, in a flight deck. That's why we have procedures and checklists. You know what your minimums are, what the requirements are, and you stay within those margins of safety. But in business is more volatile. There's so many, it is poker. People say business is like chess. No, chess, you can memorize moves. Poker, there is an element that is unpredictable.
It's like the weather.
It's like the weather. You can start to recognize patterns and trends, and you kind of, over time, you learn, but it's very unpredictable. So I think like fundamentals of business, I've said it before, this is Karl Bryan playbook, our friend of ours, he's mentor to me. But I mean, like, you have to understand revenue, gross profit, net profit, break even. You need to understand that. Now, before I get into that, and I'll break that down in a second, but one thing you kind of learn too is you don't use your own money. And I know that's really difficult when you're a baby entrepreneur and you have an idea, and it's like, but here's the thing. Here's a clue. If nobody wants to fund it, it might not be a very good idea. Sometimes it's a good idea. But like if people are like, yeah, I wouldn't give you a cent toward that, you might need to think about that. When you have a good idea and there is a market for your idea, you can get people's money. They will fund it. So that's a key thing to remember. And so then this brings me to like, go get a client first before you build a business, because so many times people build this business and then nobody wants it. It's like, well, yeah, because it's not a useful business. You're not actually solving a problem for somebody with your business. Or the
market audience isn't large enough to support it.
It's not large enough. It's not there. But if you don't have, I think there's a market for anything. I mean, you just have to understand how to solve a problem. And if you do not solve a problem that somebody has, and provide them with a solution that they want that they don't have, you don't have a business. You're there just to suck oxygen out of the room and try to capture a little bit of market share, which is not very interesting. I mean, that's like a pizza stand. It's like, okay, I mean, yeah, just going to put it on a block with 100 other restaurants. Well, okay, I might capture 1% of people that walk by, and maybe that's viable, but like, you need to solve a problem. So it's much easier to build a business after you already have a customer than to build a business and then go find a customer. But what do entrepreneurs do? They want fancy websites and they want awesome business cards and t-shirts and mugs, but they don't have any customers because there is no business. So you have to do that. But let's say you have a business and you're okay. So what are the warning signs that I should get out? That it's a cul-de-sac or a cliff? Well, one is, okay, so some basic things. And it's amazing to me when I talk to entrepreneurs, it's like, so what are your revenues? And they're like, what's revenue? What's how much money you're getting paid? Oh, you mean how much I kept? No, that's profit. Well, you mean after expenses? Well, it depends. So you need to understand some very basic fundamentals of business. Revenue is what is the cash that lands in the kitty, right? I have a lemonade stand, and I sell, lemonade for $5, $1 a cup, and I sell 5 cups. I have $5 in revenue. Okay, that's revenue. Now you have to subtract the cost of your goods, the COGS. Cost of goods would be the
material that you
Crystal
purchase.
Light,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
If you're my kids, Crystal Light lemonade stand. I'm like, nobody wants to drink that shit. Surprisingly, they do. But okay. But the powder, the water, the cup,
or the actual lemons,
the lemons, which is much better. A little sugar, right?
Water,
little water, honey. That's the cost of your goods. Revenue minus cost of goods gives you your gross profit. That's how much you made. Okay, that's what I made after my cost of goods. But you're not done yet, right? And let's say that's going to be a 50%. 50%, and then you can get the margin by dividing the revenue by the cost. All right, so you get your profit margin. Let's say it's 50%, meaning after the cost of goods, you keep 50 cents on that dollar that somebody paid. But you're not done yet, because now you've got to staff it. You got to have the electricity for your little sign. You got to have your advertising. You got to rent space, your business license, all that other stuff. That's called your overhead. You subtract the overhead from your gross profit, and that is your net. That's what you capture at the end. It's the net at the bottom of the Swiss cheese model of Reason's model, right? That's your net. That's what you net that. That's what you get to keep. So then let's say that's 20%. So you spend $1 after your cost of goods, you got 50 cents. After all your overhead, now you have 20 cents left. That's your profit. That's what your profit is. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. You need to understand, this is the key thing. When I work with a business owner or an entrepreneur or a business, whatever, depending on what the coaching engagement is, but if any involvement in sort of like their strategy towards their business, and at work with their financial department, their CFO, CEO, CFO, you got to understand their break even. Their break even. So, the break even. I can't even. I wish I could draw this on a chalkboard, but I can't because it's a podcast. It's audio. But basically, you want to divide, very simply, you divide the overhead by the gross profit percent. So let's say you have a total revenue of $1 million, and your gross profit is $500,000. That's 50% gross profit margin, and your net profit is $200,000, which is 20%. The overhead would be $300,000. And if you take $300,000, you divide it by that gross profit margin as a percent, which is $50,000, that would be $600,000. What's $300,000 divided by 50%? Actually, hold on. Let me get a calculator. I told you I can't do this in my head. Pilots can't do mental math. Let's do this. So you got $1 million minus gross profit of $500,000. That gives you 50%, correct?
Yep.
Minus another 300, or you got 200,000. That's a 20% profit margin.
Net profit margin.
Net profit margin. Which means your overhead is 300,000.
Yes.
Right? So if you divide the overhead by the gross profit percent, so 300,000 divided by 50%, it's 600,000.
I see what you did. Yeah.
It's 600,000. That's your break even. Because you have $1 million in profit, or $1 million in total revenue.
You need to generate at least $600,000 in revenue.
So here's the deal.
Yep.
You've got to hustle. And this is where they don't understand this. Your business should be focusing on hitting that 600,000 as fast as possible. This is why. Remember, our gross profit margin was 50%, meaning we keep half. But then after you subtract all your overhead, you only keep 20%. Once you hit 600,000, every dollar that you make you make 50% on that dollar.
Because you've covered your overhead.
Because you covered your overhead.
That's the key
And
right
so,
there. Is,
and they don't understand. And so it's like, that's why you're not profitable. They go, I have all this money coming in, and well, you know, we're doing everything. It's churning, right? We're making $500,000 a year. Why am I still broke? Because you're still working at your net profit margin as a percent. You're still working at 20%. So you've got to get past your break even.
So this is part, to if I can rephrase it for the idiots in the group like me, this is where this is part of your pre-start planning when you're looking and going, what is my overhead going to be before I make my first dollar?
That's right.
So I haven't even started yet, but I know I'm going to have all these other expenses that whether I make $1 or not, that's still there. It's like the utilities. The lights are still going to be on, even if no one shows up. I still got to pay the electric bill. So you're saying you got to know before you start, you better hit at least 600,000. You know, before
and think about your market. Zero. Yeah, right. Think about like your target market and how many units you have to sell and how much. And they don't plan on that. They're like, well, I don't know. You know, I don't know how many I need to sell. I just want to sell more. It's like,
so in that example, 600,000. And if each widget that you're selling is $10, you've got to sell 60,000 of those.
That's right.
And what's the cost that you're going to have to do to produce 60,000 and to market that? So those are, I think but that's all part of that prior planning. The old saying prevents piss poor performance.
Yes.
That you don't do. You just start not realizing, okay, what's my goal just to get to zero before I can start putting anything back into my pocket? Because up until that point, everything's an outlay. You're not even covering your costs.
Nope.
And so a lot of people do that, and they set themselves up where all of a sudden now they're going, why am I hear guys talk about it all the time. Oh, I made $350,000 last year in sales. Well, but you could see the stress and go, what's going on? Well, I'm not making any money. And they can't equate that the sales, everybody like you, I think Carl Bryan has said it. People talk about how they make $500,000 or $1 million and they're broke.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with how much you make. No, it's how much you keep.
Yep.
That's whether you're viable. And how much you keep is your understanding of the numbers and understanding of the strategy and understanding what should be your strategy. So if you ask me, so let's say I'm coaching you and you're like, okay, we make $1 million in total revenue. And I'm like, dude, 600,000 is what we put up on the chalkboard in huge numbers every day. And when we work with the accountants, we are hustling to be able, and when we come up with a marketing plan and all of our strategy and how we understand our numbers is with that break even in mind, is toward the service of that break even, so that all future profits past the break even are at gross profit margins, not net. That's one thing like that. And there's 50 things, that goes into this.
But here's the more realistic one that unfortunately you've talked about is the fact is they didn't make $1 million. You go to the person and go, okay, what was your sales last year? $468,000. Oh, that's awesome. Let's talk about where you need to be. And that's when you went through your calculations and go, oh, by the way, that's great. $468,000 is awesome. You needed to be at 600.
Right.
You haven't even you still have another $132,000 to go before you even can start talking. So that number looks really good until you realize you never even got to where you needed to be just to start putting money in the pocket. And I think that's where I was going with this when I first started was about the mindset that you go into the business with going, and if you're going to start these things, make sure that you understand eyes wide open where you need to go other than the fact just because you like doing something, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to treat it as more than a hobby and try to treat it as a business, then look at all the things that you need to do to make it a profitable one. Because if you don't do that, your mindset, you weren't in the proper mindset to start with, and it's just going to set you up for a tremendous amount of stress and or failure because you're going, why am I not being profitable? I'm making $500,000. Well, you needed another 100,000 before you even started making money.
So I agree. I think you have to understand some of the basics of like numbers. You got to be able to, the second thing I think you just sort of thought of this when you're talking about that is they don't control accounts receivable. They don't control accounts payable. So accounts receivable is how you get paid, like when you get paid. You want your cash position to be high. And when there's a delay in payment, that creates a problem. There can be cash flow issues. That's very common where businesses are in this, like, okay, are you in a permanent dip, where it's basically a cul-de-sac or a cliff, or are not? So when you can start to control that of how you get paid in a more expeditious way, that can be part of it. Secondly, is you want to delay how much you pay out as quickly as possible. So one of the things that I do with businesses, the first thing I do is I'm like, okay, I want to see the credit card statements of everything. And if you've got your, stuff on there that you don't want me to see, like your porn subscriptions or whatever the hell it is, right? Just take a magic marker, a black marker. Which shouldn't
be on there for a business, right? Anyways.
Right, exactly. But I mean, it's just like, it's crazy what people are like. I don't want to show you my expenses because they're hiding stuff. But I'm like, listen, I need to know what the expenses are, and then my job is I turn it into a game. I say, I want to either you have to convince me not to cut this expense. Just cut it. Second, if we can't cut it, is there a cheaper version of it that we can use, right? You don't need the gold plan. Maybe you need the bronze plan to do, minimum effective dose to what we need. And if we can't cut the version of it, then let's see if we can renegotiate the cost. And we just go do it line item by line item. It's like, let's cut it, let's find the cheaper version, or let's renegotiate it. And that is like free money, man. It's just free money. You're saving money.
Oh, every
That's the
dollar.
first piece. Every
it's dollar for dollar. It's like a tax credit.
And it's significant. I mean, when you do this, you're like, people are shocked at how much money it's like, I just found you $100K right there. You have to do that. Second is raise prices. Can you raise prices? Can the market bear that? Is the value there of what but raising prices, if you just raise prices 10%, it's amazing. There's a little calculator that you and I know about. You can see where you can literally afford to lose 40% of your clients if you just raise your price 10%. I mean, it's like, that blows people's minds when they just understand the numbers.
And conversely, when you offer a 10% discount,
terrible.
It has. How much more you have to make it? It doesn't sound like a lot, does it?
It could be 60% more you have to sell to accommodate for a 10% discount.
It's amazing.
This is just understanding the numbers. So all right, so then let's say you kind of go work through that 80-20, 80-20, 20% of what you do accounts for 80% of your profit. And so, and then conversely, you're spending 80% of your products or what you do accounts for 20% of your profits. So you want to get rid of that as quickly as possible and put all of your energy towards the most profitable aspects of your business, whether that's a service, whether it's a type of avatar of customer, whatever it is. You want to do 80-20, 80-20, 80-20, 80-20. Now you got your one thing. That's most
important. It sounds
important.
cold, but it's a business. And sometimes, and if you're really, really profitable, then you have the freedom and the liberty to do certain things that you couldn't do otherwise. But if you don't do that, you're going to be just struggling all the time because, like you say, a lot of your time, energy, effort, and money is going to go to things that don't really help the business become profitable and remain profitable.
That's right. So that's 80-20. And then, okay, I'm just grabbing at some basic fundamental stuff here. And then the last thing I would do is understanding okay, so what are the 5 things that matter the most in a business? Well, you have to have leads, meaning you've got to be able to figure out who are potential clients. And that can be confusing. You don't actually know who your client is. And when you're 80-20, then you're like, oh, okay, that's our client that we need to go after. That's the customer. So you've got to be able to generate leads. Then you have to be able to convert the leads into a client or a customer.
To an actual buyer.
To a buyer, right? It's great if you go door to door, but if nobody wants to buy, it's a waste. So you've got to have a process. So a process for determining your leads, a process then for converting the leads to clients, Then you have to increase the number of transactions. They call that lifetime value, right? Get them to buy more, right? Use your service
and more often.
More often.
Repeat buyers.
You have to have a competitive pricing strategy, which is really a competitive upfront offer. You have to have upsells. You have to have downsells. You have to have cross-sells. And most people have none of that. They're just like, what do you mean? I just sell this. And it's like, that's just pure silliness. I mean, would you like fries with that? Yeah. It is like, is a $1 billion solution to McDonald's, or, I mean, it's like,
yeah, it's amazing how much money that's generated them over the years.
Do you want to supersize? I think they got rid of that because it's making people fat and sick, but which good, they should get rid of that. But it's like, that's the idea. Or, okay, you don't want this. Well, how about something that is more appropriate or smaller as a place to start?
Because you already got them in the door. So anything else you add should just add to your bottom line.
That's right. So that's, proper upfront pricing. You need a pricing strategy, and then fundamentals of building profit, which is understanding numbers, understanding things like net and gross and total revenue and break-even points and those kinds of things. But what most entrepreneurs do is they go, I have a great idea and here's a website. It's like, that's just, that's not enough to get it done.
I will give you a personal experience that I think people need to look at if you're going to start a venture outside of your primary occupation, whatever it is don't get absorbed or fall into the trap of the shiny object syndrome. And, if you're virtual, in other words, you have a website, people are always offering you new software that will solve this problem, whether it really solves your problem or not. This is the newest, latest. Or if you have a physical business, hey, this new piece of equipment is going to do this for you, or it's going to allow you to be 10% more efficient. You've got to weigh out, does the improved efficiency or ability to get to your client outweigh the cost that it takes to purchase the item, whether it's software or a new printer or a new, if you're, whatever it is you're doing, because people always want the newest, the greatest, the best. And most of the time you don't need it. And I fell into that trap, and it's insidious. You think you're doing what's right for the business, and you're really just spending money you don't have before you've really justified the need for it. So be careful when you start something. Get what you need. Don't get what you want, because wants are not needs. And if you're going to start something like this, be lean. And then as you become profitable, then you can start making those kind of decisions. Because otherwise, the whole reason I talked about this is the stress that I saw people and that happened in me, that it may not affect your flying if you're as a pilot, but it sure as heck affects your family.
It screws your life up. It's
just, those are the things that are the foundation of your life. So don't create self-imposed stress or burdens. Go into this and do like anything else that you do. You have SOPs, you have processes. Take advantage of all the things that you have at your hands and available, so that when you start it, you've set yourself up for success. Because I'll be honest with you, my people say, oh, you got to be smart to be a pilot. Well, for all my smarts, when I started my business, I wasn't so smart. And
I've had a lot of hard lessons I've learned over the years too. And it's not, and that's part of the game. I mean, if you want to play the game, you're going to get run over sometimes, and that's just.
But learn from it.
Learn from it. But here's I want to leave it with this. This is, to me, the most important thing. Just help somebody. If you don't help if your business is not actually providing help, this is why look, no offense to realtors and pilots but it's like you can't spit without hitting 25 realtors. Everybody's a realtor, but what makes you different from everybody else? And if you're not doing something different, you're just a commodity. And you're just going to try to grab some market share, and that's about it. And I think that real entrepreneurship is about creating value and providing something that is so unique and so helpful and so needed that only you can do, that nobody can do better than you. That's a business that you can run with.
What Matt just said is a whole podcast and then some by itself. But if you want to look up these two terms, they're the same thing, pretty much: unique selling proposition and a market dominating position. Look those up, because that's exactly what Matt's talking about. Offering something that is unique, that all things being equal, they're going to want to take you over someone else, because otherwise you just get lost in the crowd because you're just like everybody else. So it doesn't make any difference whether they grab you or someone else or get to the same spot. You got to offer them something that they can't get from anybody else but you. So much for the script.
What just happened? I don't even know what just happened.
Yeah. I'm surprised you haven't hit stop record.
Here's my parting shot. The dog didn't win.
But you haven't either yet, because did the dog go over to them?
We're at a stalemate. Here's a picture. Here she is on camera. You can see her. She's crashed out on the floor out there. She is going to hold out.
Yeah. So I still stand by my comment. You'll lose. The dog will win eventually.
She's going to completely win. She's got those big sad puppy eyes. It's like, oh.
Well, we've come to another end. Thank you for listening to us talk about something that's a little bit different. Still ties into the overall mental skills and awareness. And it is something that affects so many of us that we kind of choose to do on our own. So with that, we thank you for listening. Please hit the share, leave a comment, send us your questions. We want to hear from you. We love you. And we look forward to seeing you on our next podcast. Until then, we hope you have a great week, and take care.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the LiftAffect podcast. If you want to dive deeper into this episode and every episode, go to our website, LiftAffect.com/podcast. If you're enjoying the show, we would love it if you'd follow us on Spotify and rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. We really appreciate your support. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, all with the ID Matthew McNeil. This show is brought to you by LiftAffect, a clinical mental health and consulting company that assists air carriers, corporate flight departments, pilot unions, and commercial pilots by providing comprehensive psychotherapy and mental skills coaching services to pilots with mental health and mental performance-related issues. Visit LiftAffect.com, that's LiftAffect.com, to book your free consultation. And finally, this podcast is for general informational purposes only. It does not constitute the practice of counseling, psychotherapy, medicine, or any other healthcare service, including the giving of medical advice. No therapeutic or provider-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information and any materials linked to this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content of this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional psychological advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining advice for any psychological or medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the LiftAffect podcast.